The massive alien ships appeared in Earth's sky on a Tuesday morning, their gleaming hulls blocking out the sun over major cities worldwide. For 3 days, they simply waited, silent and imposing, while humanity held its collective breath. When they finally made contact, their message was simple: we wish to speak with your leaders. The meeting took place in a hastily constructed facility in Geneva, its white walls still smelling of fresh paint. Dr. James Mitchell adjusted his tie nervously as he walked through the corridors alongside Ambassador Helen Clark. As Earth's top expert on alien life, James had spent years imagining this moment. He had pictured wise beings sharing knowledge, or perhaps fearsome warriors testing humanity's strength. He never imagined they would look at humans like disappointed teachers examining failed students. Admiral Korath stood nearly 8 feet tall, his dark scales gleaming under the conference room lights. His 4 yellow eyes moved constantly, taking in every detail of the human delegation with what seemed like barely contained disdain. Beside him sat Vex, a being made entirely of living crystal whose body chimed softly with each movement. Your species puzzles us, Korath began, his voice deep and rumbling through the translation device hanging around his neck. We have observed your world for several months. We see cities, technology, space stations. Yet we find no evidence of proper civilization. Helen leaned forward in her chair. I'm not sure I understand, Admiral. We have global governments, international law, trade agreements spanning every continent. You have no wars, Vex interrupted, his crystalline form pulsing with what the humans were learning to recognize as amusement. No conquest. No expansion through strength. How does your species grow? How do you determine who leads? James cleared his throat. We elect our leaders through democratic processes. We resolve conflicts through negotiation and compromise. We've found that cooperation produces better results than fighting. The silence that followed was deafening. Korath's scales rippled in what might have been laughter. Several other alien delegates made sounds that the translators couldn't quite render into human language. Fascinating, Korath said finally. In our galaxy, only prey species develop such tendencies. Tell me, when resources become scarce, how do you distribute them? We have international aid programs, Helen explained. Wealthier nations help those in need. We share technology, food, medical supplies. Without conquest, another alien asked from across the table. This one resembled a massive insect, its compound eyes reflecting the room's lights. You simply give away valuable resources? For nothing in return? For peace, James said firmly. For stability. For the betterment of all humanity. The aliens exchanged glances that needed no translation. They were looking at humans the way a person might look at particularly interesting zoo animals. What about your past? Vex chimed, his crystal body brightening. Surely your species has some warrior heritage? Some history of proper conflict? James felt a spark of hope. Actually, yes. Human history is filled with remarkable military achievements. We've had countless wars, brilliant strategies, incredible acts of courage. The past is irrelevant, Korath cut him off with a dismissive wave. What matters is present capability. And presently, your species lacks the fundamental strength necessary for galactic citizenship. But our industrial capacity is enormous, Helen protested. Our scientific achievements, our cultural diversity, our ability to adapt. All meaningless without the warrior spirit, the insect-like alien clicked. How would you defend yourselves against a real threat? With negotiations? With aid packages? Captain Robert Hayes, who had remained silent until now, straightened in his chair. As Earth's highest-ranking military officer present, he felt obligated to speak. Admiral, I assure you that humanity is fully capable of defending itself. Our military forces may be smaller than in past centuries, but they are highly trained and well-equipped. How many active conflicts does your species currently wage? Korath asked. Well, there are some regional tensions, but no major. How many worlds have you conquered through military force? We don't conquer worlds. We explore, we study, we . How many enemy species have you defeated in combat? Robert fell silent. The answer, of course, was 0. How could it be otherwise when humanity had never encountered another species before today? Korath stood, his massive frame casting a shadow across the table. The Galactic Federation has existed for over 3,000 years. In that time, we have seen countless species rise and fall. The strong survive and prosper. The weak are protected, like children, until they either develop strength or fade into irrelevance. You're saying we're weak? Helen asked, though the answer was already clear. You have chosen the path of least resistance, Vex explained, his tone almost gentle. While admirable in its own way, such an approach indicates a fundamental lack of survival instinct. You are sheep in a galaxy full of wolves. But sheep can be useful, Korath continued. You will be granted protected status. Your world will be defended by Federation forces. In return, you may provide support services to real military species. Medical aid, perhaps. Supply management. Nothing that requires actual courage. The meeting ended with humanity's classification as a protected pastoral species. The aliens departed with promises to establish trade relations and defensive agreements, treating Earth like a nature preserve to be managed rather than a partner to be respected. As the alien ships disappeared into the void, James stood at the observation deck watching their lights fade. Helen joined him, her diplomatic composure finally cracking. They think we're pets, she said quietly. Maybe they're right, James replied, staring at the stars. Maybe peace really has made us weak. Neither of them could imagine that within months, the galaxy would learn the difference between choosing peace and being incapable of war. The emergency signal reached Earth on a quiet Sunday morning, piercing through every communication channel simultaneously. The message was short and terrifying: all Federation worlds under attack. Enemy unknown. Request immediate assistance. Captain Robert Hayes stood in the newly built Federation Command Center on Lunar Base, watching alien commanders argue in a dozen different languages. The translation devices worked overtime, filling the air with a constant buzz of overlapping voices. None of them sounded confident. The enemy calls themselves the Void Swarm, Admiral Korath announced, his scales darker than usual. They appeared 6 weeks ago at the Galactic Rim. 17 star systems have gone completely silent. No survivors, no wreckage. Just empty space where planets used to be. The holographic display showed a map of the galaxy with growing red zones marking lost territories. The red was spreading faster each day. What do they want? Asked General Thex, a snake-like creature whose species prided themselves on military intelligence. Unknown, Korath replied grimly. They don't respond to communication attempts. They simply consume everything in their path and move on. Robert raised his hand tentatively. Captain Hayes, representing Earth Defense Forces. If I may ask about their tactics dash. Humans will handle supply operations, Korath interrupted without even looking at him. We need medical stations, food distribution, equipment transport. Leave the actual fighting to those equipped for it. Sir, with respect, Earth has extensive military databases. Our historical records contain thousands of years of tactical information that might dash. Ancient history, Vex chimed from his crystal form. Your species hasn't fought a real war in decades. You've grown soft, Captain. Be grateful we're allowing you to help at all. Robert felt his jaw tighten but kept his voice steady. Admiral, our industrial capacity alone could dash. Could provide excellent support services, Korath finished. Which is exactly what we need. The Draknari will lead the assault fleets. The Nagari will handle reconnaissance. The Threx will manage orbital bombardments. Humans will keep everyone fed and supplied. The assignment was humiliating. Earth's entire military contribution was reduced to running supply depots and field hospitals, stationed light years from any actual combat. Robert found himself commanding a logistics hub on Kepler 442b, a dreary mining world that served as a staging area for Federation forces. Lieutenant Emily Watson walked through the supply depot, checking inventory lists on her tablet. Around her, human technicians and engineers worked alongside alien contractors, though the aliens made it clear they considered the humans junior partners at best. Another convoy heading out, reported Sergeant Tom Bradley, watching Federation warships depart for the front lines. Draknari battle cruisers, Nagari stealth fighters, Threx heavy bombers. Quite a sight. Emily nodded absently, studying casualty reports from recent engagements. The numbers were disturbing. The Federation was losing ships faster than they could replace them, and the Void Swarm seemed to adapt to every tactic thrown at them. Called Corporal Lisa Morgan from her communication station, we've got incoming refugees. 3 evacuation transports, badly damaged. They're requesting emergency landing clearance. How many? Emily asked, already moving toward the landing bay. Reports indicate over 8,000 civilians. Mixed species. They're the last survivors from the Altair colony. Emily felt a chill run down her spine. Altair had been one of the Federation's most heavily defended systems, protected by 3 full battle fleets. If it had fallen, nowhere was safe. The refugee ships limped into the docking bay trailing smoke and sparking from damaged systems. As the survivors stumbled out, Emily saw something she hadn't expected in the eyes of these warrior races: pure terror. An elderly Draknari leaned heavily on a walking stick, his once proud scales now dull and cracked. "You're human?" he asked Emily in broken standard. "Yes, sir. Lieutenant Watson, Earth Defense Forces. We're here to help." The old warrior looked at her with something approaching pity. "Run," he whispered. "Take your soft people and run far away. This enemy, they're not like anything we've ever faced." "What do you mean?" Emily asked gently. "They learn," another refugee said, a crystalline being whose form was cracked and dim. "Every tactic we use, every weapon we fire, every strategy we employ. Within hours, they adapt. They become immune. They become better." "The Federation's greatest generals are dead," the old Draknari continued. "Admiral Zorthak, undefeated in 200 battles. General Krix, hero of the Spiral Wars. Commander Velthos, master of siege warfare. All dead. All their knowledge, all their experience, useless against this enemy." Emily helped the wounded refugees to the medical bay, listening to their stories. The Void Swarm didn't just attack randomly. They studied their opponents, learned their weaknesses, and exploited them with ruthless efficiency. Traditional military doctrine was worse than useless against them. "They're coming this way," another refugee whispered to Emily as she helped him to a medical bed. "The outer rim is gone. The middle systems are falling. Soon they'll reach the core worlds, and then—" He trailed off, too frightened to finish. That night, Emily stood in her quarters reviewing tactical reports by the light of an alien moon. The Federation's finest military minds were failing spectacularly. Their rigid doctrines, their centuries of established warfare, their proud warrior traditions, all meaningless against an enemy that refused to play by the rules. She thought about Earth, about humanity's peaceful cities and diplomatic solutions. The aliens had called them weak, soft, unsuited for real conflict. Maybe they were right. Maybe when the Void Swarm finally reached the core systems, humanity's protected status wouldn't matter anyway. But something nagged at her as she read the reports. The Federation kept using the same approaches, expecting different results. They fought like they'd always fought, unable to adapt when their methods failed. Emily closed the reports and stared out at the stars. Somewhere out there, an unstoppable enemy was consuming entire worlds. And humanity, dismissed as too peaceful to matter, might be the only species flexible enough to find a different way to fight. The attack came without warning on a Tuesday that had started like any other. Lieutenant Emily Watson was reviewing supply manifests when the first alarms began screaming across Kepler 442b. The sound cut through the morning routine like a knife, sending everyone in the depot scrambling for emergency stations. "Contact!" Corporal Lisa Morgan shouted from her communications post. "Multiple bogies incoming from the outer system. They're big. Really big." Emily rushed to the main display screen, her heart sinking as she saw the readouts. Dozens of massive shapes were moving toward their position, each one the size of a Federation battleship but moving in patterns unlike anything in their tactical databases. "Get me Admiral Korath," she ordered, but Lisa was already shaking her head. No response from the main fleet. Last transmission was 3 hours ago from the Rigel defense line. Since then, nothing. The Void Swarm had found them. Within minutes, the first Federation defenders were engaging the enemy in the outer atmosphere. Emily watched through the depot's external cameras as sleek Draknari cruisers dove toward the strange, writhing ships of the Void Swarm. The alien vessels looked more grown than built, their surfaces rippling like living tissue. "By the stars," whispered Sergeant Tom Bradley, standing beside her. "What are those things?" The Draknari fired first, their plasma cannons lighting up the sky with brilliant blue streaks. The energy beams struck the Void Swarm ship's dead center, and for a moment Emily felt a spark of hope. But then the impossible happened. The enemy vessels absorbed the plasma fire like sponges, their surfaces glowing brighter with each hit. Within seconds, the Void Swarm ships began firing back with weapons identical to the Draknari cannons. Same color, same energy signature, same devastating effect. But they fired faster, more accurately, with a precision that turned the battle into a slaughter. "They're learning," Emily breathed, watching Federation ships explode one by one. "They're copying our weapons in real time." The battle lasted less than 2 hours. When it was over, the few surviving alien defenders were either dead or fleeing toward the inner systems. The Void Swarm ships settled into orbit around Kepler 442b like predators studying their prey. Lisa called out, her voice shaking. I'm picking up a transmission from the enemy ships. It's in standard Federation language. Put it through, Emily ordered. The voice that came through the speakers was cold and mechanical, but the words were perfectly clear. Humans of the supply depot. We have analyzed your species. You pose no threat. Remain in your facility and you will not be harmed. We have more important targets to pursue. Emily felt a surge of anger at the dismissive tone. Even the enemy thought humans were harmless. But before she could respond, another message came through on the emergency frequency. This is Evacuation Transport 7, a panicked alien voice transmitted. We have 15,000 civilian refugees aboard, mostly younglings from the outer colonies. Our engines are failing. We're making emergency landing on Kepler 442b. Please, anyone who can hear this, we need help. Emily looked at her small team of 40 humans. They had no weapons beyond basic security sidearms, no military training beyond standard logistics courses, and no chance against an enemy that had just destroyed an entire Federation battle group. But 15,000 civilians were about to crash land on a planet now occupied by hostile forces that consumed everything in their path. Lisa, try to raise the transport. Guide them to Landing Bay 7, it's the farthest from the enemy positions. Tom said quietly, what are we going to do? We can't fight those things. Emily stared at the tactical display, watching Void Swarm ships beginning to move toward the crash site. The refugees would be slaughtered the moment they landed. Something stirred in her mind, a memory from her grandfather who had served in Earth's last major conflict decades ago. He used to tell stories about impossible odds, about ordinary people doing extraordinary things when everything seemed lost. Not because they were naturally violent, but because they had something worth protecting. We're going to buy them time, she said finally. Oh. Tom looked confused. We're logistics personnel. We don't have weapons, we don't have training dash. We have minds, Emily interrupted, her voice growing stronger. And we have something these aliens have never learned to do. What's that? Improvise. Emily turned to face her small team. They looked back at her with expressions ranging from confusion to terror. These were clerks, engineers, medical technicians, and supply managers. Not one of them had ever fired a shot in anger. Listen up, she said, her voice carrying through the depot's communication system. In about 30 minutes, 15,000 innocent beings are going to land on this planet. And if we do nothing, they're all going to die. She paused, looking at each face in turn. The Federation says we're too peaceful to fight. The enemy says we're too weak to matter. They're both wrong. We're not peaceful because we can't fight. We're peaceful because we choose to be. But when innocent lives are at stake, when children are in danger, that choice changes. Tom straightened up slightly. What do you need us to do? Emily smiled grimly, feeling something ancient and dangerous awakening in her chest. Her species had spent centuries learning to choose peace over war. But they had never forgotten how to fight when fighting was the only option left. We're going to show these aliens what humans are really capable of, she said. And we're going to do it with whatever we can find. The awakening had begun. The first Void Swarm scout ships descended toward the crash site like black thunderclouds, their organic hulls pulsing with stolen energy from the destroyed Federation fleet. Lieutenant Emily Watson crouched behind a stack of supply crates, watching the enemy through her binoculars as they approached the smoking wreckage of Evacuation Transport 7. Remember, she whispered into her comm unit, we're not trying to win a battle. We're buying time for those civilians to get to the underground shelters. Her improvised team of 40 logistics personnel was scattered across the depot in positions that would have made any military instructor laugh. They had no proper weapons, no armor, no training for combat operations. What they did have was something the rigid alien military minds couldn't understand, the ability to think outside every rule of warfare ever written. Tom, are your explosive charges ready? Emily asked. Roger that, Sergeant Bradley's voice crackled back. Maintenance charges from the mining equipment, rigged to motion sensors from the security system. Not military grade, but they'll make some noise. Lisa, what's the status on our special delivery? Corporal Morgan's voice carried a hint of amazement. I still can't believe this is going to work. The industrial fabricators have finished printing the decoy targets. They look exactly like Federation weapon signatures on enemy sensors. Emily smiled grimly. While the aliens had spent centuries perfecting the art of honorable combat, humans had spent just as long learning how to fight dirty when survival was on the line. The Void Swarm's ability to copy and adapt to weapons was impressive, but it had one critical weakness: they could only copy what they could identify. The first enemy ground units landed near the transport wreckage, moving with mechanical precision toward the scattered refugees. They looked like walking nightmares, black metal skeletons covered in the same organic material as their ships, constantly shifting and adapting as they moved. "Here they come," Emily whispered. "Phase 1, go." The mining charges exploded in sequence, sending up massive clouds of dust and debris. But these weren't random explosions. Tom had placed them to channel the enemy forces into specific corridors, herding them like sheep toward the real trap. The Void Swarm units paused, their forms rippling as they analyzed the explosions. Within seconds, they began generating their own explosive devices, copying the mining charges perfectly. But they were copying the wrong thing. "Phase 2, Emily ordered. The decoy weapons came online, broadcasting fake energy signatures that mimicked Federation plasma cannons, particle beams, and missile systems. The Void Swarm forces immediately began adapting, their bodies reshaping to counter weapons that didn't actually exist. While the enemy was busy preparing for attacks that would never come, the real assault began. "Now!" Emily shouted. What happened next would have horrified any trained military observer. The humans didn't fight like soldiers. They fought like humans. Maintenance worker Jack Roberts had rigged the depot's cargo loading system to fire supply containers like massive bullets. Each container was packed with industrial solvents that ate through the enemy's adaptive armor before they could analyze and counter the chemical composition. Chef Mary Collins had weaponized the food preparation systems, turning cooking oil into flammable traps and kitchen knives into guided projectiles launched by repurposed medical equipment. Engineer David Lee had transformed the communication array into a sonic weapon that broadcast frequencies specifically designed to disrupt the enemy's coordination signals, turning their perfect teamwork into confused chaos. "They're adapting to the sonic attack," Lisa reported. "Generating counter-frequencies. Switch to subsonic pulses," Emily ordered. "Make them adapt to that." The beautiful, terrible thing about human warfare was its unpredictability. Every time the Void Swarm began to counter one attack, the humans switched to something completely different. They used the depot's artificial gravity generators as weapons. They turned the water recycling system into a delivery method for caustic chemicals. They even used the toilets as improvised projectile launchers. Tom's voice came through the comm with barely controlled excitement. "The civilians are reporting all clear. They've reached the underground shelters." "Good," Emily replied, watching the enemy forces growing increasingly erratic as they struggled to adapt to tactics that made no logical sense. "Now comes the fun part." Captain Robert Hayes arrived with reinforcements just as the depot's main buildings began to collapse. His transport ship descended through smoke and flames to find something that defied every military manual ever written. The Void Swarm forces, which had adapted to and overcome every Federation tactic, were in complete disarray. "What in the name of?" Robert breathed, watching human logistics personnel systematically dismantling enemy units using equipment that shouldn't have been weapons at all. "Sir," his pilot said, pointing at the tactical display, "the enemy forces are retreating." It was true. The Void Swarm units were pulling back, their adaptive systems overloaded by the sheer impossibility of what they were trying to counter. How do you adapt to an enemy that doesn't follow any rules? How do you copy weapons that aren't actually weapons? Emily's voice came through the comm system, calm and professional despite the chaos around her. "Captain Hayes, this is Lieutenant Watson. The civilian evacuation is complete. The enemy ground forces have been neutralized or driven off. Supply depot is secure." "Lieutenant," Robert said, his voice filled with something approaching awe, "what exactly did you do down there?" "We fought like humans, sir," Emily replied simply. "Turns out that's something nobody in this galaxy knows how to handle." The storm had been unleashed, and the galaxy would never underestimate humanity again. 3 months after the battle at Kepler 442b, Admiral Korath stood in the Federation's Grand War Room staring at a tactical display that showed something impossible. The red zones marking Void Swarm territory were shrinking for the first time since the invasion began. Green sectors labeled Human Advisory Control were spreading across the galaxy like wildfire. "I don't understand," General Thex hissed, her serpentine form coiled in frustration. "How are they doing this? The humans have no proper weapons, no battle fleets, no warrior tradition." Captain Robert Hayes stood quietly at the edge of the circle of alien commanders, watching them struggle to comprehend what humanity had accomplished in just 12 weeks. The irony wasn't lost on him. These same beings had dismissed humans as too peaceful to matter, and now they were begging for human tactical advice. "Show them the Arcturus engagement," Robert said simply. The holographic display shifted to show the battle for the Arcturus system, where a single human advisor had coordinated the defense of 3 Federation worlds. Lieutenant Emily Watson's face appeared in the recording, calm and focused as she spoke to a dozen different alien commanders. "The enemy is adapting to your plasma weapons," Emily's recorded voice explained. "So stop using plasma weapons. Use kinetic projectiles, chemical explosives, electromagnetic pulses. When they adapt to those, switch to something else. Keep them guessing." "But kinetic weapons are primitive," a Draknari commander protested in the recording. "Beneath the dignity of true warriors." "Your dignity won't matter if you're dead," Emily replied bluntly. "Pride is a luxury you can't afford against this enemy." The recording showed what happened next. Federation forces abandoned their traditional tactics and began fighting with a flexibility that shocked the Void Swarm. Mining equipment became weapons. Cargo ships became bombers. Communication arrays became jamming devices. The enemy's adaptive advantage became meaningless when faced with opponents who never used the same approach twice. "Impossible," Vex chimed, his crystalline form dimming with confusion. "Warfare has rules, established doctrines, proven strategies. You can't simply make up tactics as you go along." "Why not?" Robert asked. "That's what we've always done. Human military history isn't about following rules. It's about breaking them when breaking them gives you an advantage." Admiral Koratha's 4 eyes focused on a different part of the display, showing casualty reports from recent engagements. "Your species is losing fewer soldiers than any of our warrior races. How is this possible when you fight so recklessly?" "We don't fight recklessly," Robert corrected. "We fight smart. We use cover, we retreat when necessary, we attack weak points instead of throwing ourselves at strong ones. Just because we're unpredictable doesn't mean we're stupid." Dr. James Mitchell entered the war room carrying a datapad filled with psychological profiles. As Earth's representative to the Federation Council, he had spent weeks trying to explain human nature to alien minds that couldn't grasp the concept of chosen peace. "Admirals, generals," James began, his voice carrying the patience of a teacher addressing particularly difficult students, "I need you to understand something fundamental about humanity. We didn't abandon warfare because we were weak. We abandoned it because we were too good at it." The silence that followed was profound. Even the translation devices seemed to pause, processing words that challenged everything the aliens thought they knew. "What do you mean?" Korath asked slowly. "Human history spans thousands of years of continuous warfare," James explained. "We've fought with sticks and stones, swords and shields, guns and bombs, chemical weapons and nuclear missiles. We've developed tactics for every environment, strategies for every situation, and contingencies for every contingency." He activated his datapad, showing images of human conflicts throughout history. "We learned to fight in forests and deserts, on mountains and in cities, on land and sea and in the air. We studied our enemies, adapted to their methods, and always found new ways to achieve victory." "Then why did you stop?" Vex chimed. "Because we realized that our greatest strength wasn't our ability to destroy our enemies," James said quietly. "It was our ability to turn enemies into allies. We discovered that building was more powerful than breaking, that cooperation achieved more than conquest." The alien commanders exchanged glances that spoke volumes. They were beginning to understand that they had fundamentally misread humanity's nature. "Your species chose peace," Korath said, his voice carrying a new tone of respect. "But you never forgot how to wage war." "Exactly," Robert confirmed. "We kept all the knowledge, all the skills, all the tactical flexibility that made us dangerous. We just decided to use those abilities for protection rather than aggression." Emily Watson's voice came through the communication system from her current assignment coordinating the defense of the Vega colonies. "Command, this is Forward Advisory Team 7. The Void Swarm is attempting a new adaptation strategy. They're trying to mimic our unpredictability. Can they succeed?" Korath asked. Emily's laugh came through clearly. "Sir, they're trying to systematically copy random behavior. It's like trying to paint a picture of chaos. The harder they try, the more predictable they become." 3 weeks later, the last Void Swarm ship was destroyed above the ruins of their original staging area. The enemy that had consumed 17 star systems and threatened the entire galaxy had been defeated not by superior firepower or advanced technology, but by opponents who refused to fight the same way twice. The Federation Council voted unanimously to grant humanity full membership status, along with permanent positions as strategic military advisors. The species they had once dismissed as too peaceful to matter had become the teachers of an entire galaxy. Admiral Korath found Captain Hayes after the ceremony, his scaled features showing something that might have been humility. "I owe your species an apology," the alien commander said. "We mistook wisdom for weakness." Robert smiled, looking out at the stars through the council chamber's viewport. "That's all right, Admiral. It's a mistake a lot of people have made over the years. We're used to proving them wrong."